Andy McCarthy is here, Fox News contributor, columnist, National Review, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, author of the #1 bestseller, The Russia Hoax. Andy, let me start with you. I am very disturbed at what is clearly to me a perjury trap for General Flynn, because they had the transcript. Nobody's ever talked about how that was obtained, why there was no minimization, why there was an unmasking, why there was leaking of raw intelligence. So that's the predicate of all this that nobody discusses in Mueller's submission to the Judge Sullivan today. That bothers me. Telling me he doesn't need a lawyer, that bothers me. You know, purposely going in casually and making it conversational, not reminding him. I mean, all of it to me sounds like a setup.
Sean, look, I think this stinks. I mean, it's fair enough to say that Flynn should not have lied to the agents. He admitted in court that he lied to them about a couple of things regarding this.
Did he? But wait a minute. But did he just admit to it as a plea deal because he had to sell his house? He had no money. Did he admit to it because he was being told behind the scenes that, well, we're going to have to investigate you and your son's business if you don't sign this? And he just says, okay, I'll just take the deal. Maybe he took the deal because it was in his best interest and family's best interest to do it, not believing he really lied.
I don't think so, Sean, because his claim in court was that he got hoodwinked into lying. Neither he nor his lawyers are saying that he told the truth. He was asked, did you ask the Russians through Kislyak not to escalate the tensions after the Obama, due to the Obama sanctions? He denied that he had said that, but he obviously did say it because it's on the tape. And he denied that the Russian ambassador had told him that they decided not to escalate out of Flynn's request. So he's not saying that he told the truth about those things. His position in court is that he didn't tell the truth. But what they haven't established is why he was questioned in the first place. It has seemed to me from the very beginning here that there was no predicate to have an investigation of Flynn. There was nothing wrong with Flynn having had those conversations with Kislyak. It was stupid for him to lie about them, but there was nothing wrong with having them in the first place. And my sense of what happened here is that they intimidated Flynn into thinking that the Logan Act, which is a moribund
by the way, 1799 law that has been exercised twice, well, not successfully.
Yeah, and I think what happened was they made Flynn think that he was in real jeopardy if he had had these conversations and discussed these matters with the Russian ambassador because of the Logan Act. And that Flynn panicked and lied about them. But that doesn't mean they should have been investigating him in the first place.
And they shouldn't have told him he shouldn't have a lawyer. I mean, that you don't get to advise somebody like that.
They shouldn't have told him that. But at the same time, he was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, and he knows you shouldn't lie to FBI agents. I mean, come on.
Is there any chance he didn't recollect it? I mean, there's no benefit of the doubt at all here that maybe he didn't have a full recollection.
Sean, he could have gone to trial if that was where he was coming from. But
maybe he didn't have the money. He had to sell his house. Greg,
you can always say at the end of a false statement, when somebody gets convicted of false statements, that it was a failure of recollection. He had the ability to litigate that. I mean, it can't be both that. It can't be both that if he tells them the truth, he should get credit for that. But if he doesn't tell them the truth, he lied.
If there was no underlying crime if there's no underlying crime.
Sean, he's not claiming now that.
No, I'm asking you though. You're saying that he might have thought it was.
I don't believe he lied. I believe he lied.
I understand that, but if there was no underlying crime, in other words, the Logan Act wouldn't have been applicable, and there was nothing wrong with him speaking to his future counterpart. Actually sounds intelligent to me. And then Comey is threading the needle, doing things he wouldn't do. in the Bush or Obama administration, and McCabe's telling them not to have a lawyer, and the agents go in with a strategy that is described in the 302 to make them seem like they're their buddies and blah, blah, blah. It just seems like a setup to me.
It's a perjury trap. I completely agree. It's a perjury trap.
All right, Greg.
Well, there are a lot of reasons somebody pleads to a process crime that I regard as, in the scheme of things, a fairly minor thing, especially if prosecutors have caused you to go broke, you've had to sell your home, and they're threatening to prosecute your son on a different matter. So that changes the equation dramatically. But I look at this 302, and what I see here is that the FBI agents, Peter Strzok, and they blank out the other one. We know it's Joe Pientka, which Rosenstein continues to hide, question mark. They say that they had the impression at the time that the defendant was interviewed that he was not lying, and they did not think he was lying. Now, that is the most important part of the 15 pages of documents that we have. We are now seeing it in the 302. And so my question would be, if I were the judge on Tuesday, Emmett Sullivan, I would say, why did you prosecute this man for lying when the agents who interviewed him determined he wasn't? And I would love to hear the answer to that. So that's what jumps out at me the most.
Andy, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I guess, the only thing that you can say about it on the lying front is whether somebody tells the truth to agents or not is not something that hinges on whether the agents correctly predict or judge that the person who they're talking to seems to be telling the truth, or at least trying to be truthful. But they're the only witnesses.
They're the only witnesses to the conversation.
No, Greg, you're leaving out the third witness, who's the most important witness, which is the person himself. And if the person himself, if I lie to you, Greg, and you think I'm telling you the truth, and then 2 months later I say, I pulled one over on Greg, the fact is I pulled one over on you regardless of whether you thought at the time that I was telling you the truth.
Andy, let me though ask a serious question. I mean, is there any chance he decided to plead to a lesser crime of lying, which means he has to say that he lied to get his kid off, or to get he can't afford the lawyers anymore and all that? I mean, you say anything to take your deal, no?
Anything is possible, but the point is,
you think he lied?
He says he lied, and his lawyers are saying he lied, and it doesn't make any sense to me that you would take a position in court that I have been pressured by the FBI, I've been hoodwinked by the FBI into
okay,
lying.
then let me ask this. You would all...
Position, why wouldn't you, Sean, why wouldn't you just say, I didn't lie? Why would you go into court and say...
Listen, I agree with... I agree with you, but again, under these circumstances, are you at all concerned, A, how this was obtained, meaning they had the transcript?
I think it's outrageous how it was obtained.
Are you concerned at the FBI's tactics here? And that means Comey and McCabe basically throwing all normal processes out the window to get to this guy when they would never do it in another administration this way.
Correct. I think that they had no basis to interview him. I think if you're interviewing a guy for intelligence purposes, you play the tape for him, and then you ask him, what did this mean? What did that mean? And if you're doing it by the book, you call the White House counsel and you say, I want to interview the national security advisor.
Because what you're describing is an honest way to handle this, Andy.
Correct. Right.
But they didn't do it that way.
That's why I think it's a perjury trap. But Sean,
is that what we're going to do? But my problem is a perjury trap for a 33-year vet, 5 years of combat is just, it doesn't just rub me the wrong way. It makes me sick to my stomach.
I'm not saying it's right, but to have a perjury trap, there's usually perjury involved. And the argument with a perjury trap is that it shouldn't have happened in the first place, not that the guy didn't commit the false statements.
Greg.
Well, in the 302 document, it talks about how Flynn was unguarded and he was not sophisticated. Those are exact words from the 302 document. So it also, in McCabe's memo that's attachment A, McCabe admits that he's pushing Flynn not to have a lawyer. He's telling him, if we bring anybody else to the room, we got to go through the Department of Justice, and so that is pushing Flynn to go solo. And the 302 makes it clear that they decided ahead of time not to tell him about the transcript. So they're setting him up. It's a perjury trap, as Andy just said. But I want to respond to one other thing. People plead guilty to lesser crimes all the time, even though they may not have committed those crimes. And I think that's what happened here. And again, this 302, the interviewing FBI agent,
if they do plead guilty to something they didn't do, a lesser crime, doesn't that mean when they go before the judge, they can't say, well, I'm doing this, I didn't really lie, but I'm doing this because this is my plea deal?
But their lawyers can make the argument that it appears he was set up, that they didn't, they pushed him not to have a lawyer, they didn't tell him about the transcript. That's all in the 302.
Stay right there. Andy McCarthy and Gregg Jarrett are with us. All right, as we continue the legal side of this Mueller filing today, knowing this Judge Sullivan's history, Gregg Jarrett, I suspect he's not happy with these tactics at all. I don't know how he's going to respond. Any prediction?
Well, I don't think he's going to be very happy. Let's forget about the fact that there was no basis to even interview Flynn. But the McCabe memo is really incendiary in front of a judge, that McCabe pushed Flynn not to have a lawyer, and they deliberately conspired to deceive Flynn that they had a transcript in which he had been illegally unmasked. But finally, I come back to what I said before. This is the first time we've seen in print from the FBI that the two agents who interviewed Flynn concluded he was not lying. And I think that would be a red flag to any judge. Wait a minute, I've got a defendant here.
Well, I wonder if the judge will look at the fact that they had the full transcript and ask, well, why was he surveilled? Why was minimization not practiced and put in place as is normal? Why was he unmasked? And who?
Well, the surveillance always happens with any when you're having a conversation with a Russian, whether it be a diplomat or not.
Okay, but they're supposed to minimize, and they're not supposed to unmask or leak the raw transcript of it. All right, last word, Andy McCarthy.
Well, I think the judge is going to be, I would think, upset about the whole way that this went forward. But it seems to me, Sean, that the big issue here is that Mueller has asked for what the judge is going to impose anyway, which is
the minimum sentence, which is probably probation.
General Flynn's going to get no time. But my point is that General Flynn is going to get no time because of his heroic service for 30 years to the country. And yet the story.
But you don't like the tactics, though, Andy. I mean, you would not have handled it this way by a long shot. You don't like it.
No, I don't like it. And I don't like that the way this is going to play out is that it's going to look like Flynn got no time because of the great cooperation he provided to the investigation. In the meantime,
and that won't be true.
He gave him much of anything.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.